The trading hall on Station Oris 7 smelled like burnt copper and old rain. That was the problem with stations built by the Xyrathi. They always tried to simulate weather indoors, and they always got it slightly wrong. Ambassador Tolek of the Kalmari stood near the viewing window, watching ships drift past like silver fish in a dark ocean. He was new to all of this. His species had only achieved faster-than-light travel 18 months ago, and the galaxy was still a strange and overwhelming place. There were so many species out there, so many rules he did not understand. His guide was a Xyrathi diplomat named Renak. Renak was tall and thin, with skin that glowed faintly blue when he was calm and shifted to pale green when he was nervous. Right now, he was blue. He had been explaining the basics of galactic politics for 3 hours, and Tolek had listened carefully to every word. But one thing did not make sense. "You keep mentioning the humans," Tolek said. "Every species I have met so far speaks of them with great care. They smile when they say the name, but their eyes do not smile. Why?" Renak's glow flickered, just for a moment, then it returned to blue. "The humans are wonderful partners," he said smoothly. "They are creative, generous, and deeply curious. They make excellent allies." "That is not what I asked." Renak looked at him for a long time. Then he walked to the window and stood beside the Kalmari ambassador, staring out at the stars. "How much do you know about the Draknari?" Renak asked. "Very little. I know they are part of the Galactic Concord. I know they are reptilian. I know they seem very polite." "They are polite now," Renak said quietly. "They were not always polite." He turned to face Tolek. His skin had shifted to a color Tolek had not seen before, somewhere between gray and deep violet. It looked like fear. "Sit down," Renak said. "I am going to tell you a story, and when I am finished, you will understand why every species in this galaxy follows one simple rule." Tolek sat. Renak began. 300 years ago, the humans were still considered young. They had been part of the galactic community for only a century, and most species saw them as friendly but unimpressive. They were small. They were soft. They lived for less than 120 years, which the Xyrathi considered barely enough time to learn how to think properly. But the humans did not seem to mind. They built trade routes. They opened cultural exchanges. They sent their doctors to heal alien plagues and their engineers to fix broken stations. They smiled constantly, which unsettled many species, and they had a strange habit of forming emotional bonds with anything that moved and several things that did not. They were by all measures harmless. The Draknari Dominion thought so too. The Dominion was a military empire that controlled 12 star systems. Their society was built on strength. They believed that power was the only language the universe truly understood, and they had spent centuries proving it. They raided border colonies. They destroyed merchant ships. They crushed smaller species under their claws and dared the galaxy to stop them. The Galactic Concord complained. The Concord passed resolutions. The Concord expressed deep concern. The Draknari ignored all of it. And then, in the year 2387 by the human calendar, they made a mistake. The colony ship Bright Horizon was carrying 2,000 human civilians to a new settlement near the edge of explored space. Families, scientists, teachers, children. It was not a military vessel. It carried no weapons. It broadcast a universal peace signal on all frequencies, as human ships always did. It entered a region of space that the Draknari had recently claimed, a claim that no other species recognized, but that the Dominion enforced with patrol fleets. A Draknari war squadron intercepted the Bright Horizon 6 hours into the disputed zone. The colony ship's captain, a woman named Adiz Mensa, immediately hailed them and offered to change course. She was polite. She was calm. She followed every protocol. The Draknari commander ordered her to surrender the ship for inspection. Captain Mensa agreed without hesitation. She opened the airlocks. She powered down the engines. She told her passengers to remain calm. The Draknari boarded the ship. What happened next was not an inspection. The distress signal reached the nearest human vessel 14 hours later. It was the UENS Perseverance, a small exploration frigate under the command of Captain Ilara Voss. Ilara was 43 years old. She had short dark hair, steady hands, and a reputation for being the most patient officer in the fleet. She had once spent 11 months negotiating a trade dispute with the Thessari without raising her voice a single time. Her crew respected her. Her enemies underestimated her. Both were mistakes, though only one of them would become clear later. The Perseverance arrived at the Bright Horizon's last known coordinates and found wreckage. The colony ship had been torn apart, not destroyed quickly the way a weapon would do it. Torn apart slowly, deliberately, the way someone pulls the wings off an insect to watch what happens. Ilara led the boarding team herself. She walked through corridors that were painted with evidence of what had been done. She saw things that her report would later describe in cold, clinical language, but that her eyes would never forget. 2,000 people, gone. The youngest had been 4 years old. Ilara stood in the ruins of what had been the children's play area. Drawings still hung on the walls, bright, happy pictures of stars and planets drawn by small hands that would never draw again. She stared at them for a long time. Her team watched her and said nothing. Commander Idris Okonkwo, her second-in-command, stepped beside her. He was a large man with kind eyes and a voice that could calm a room just by speaking, but even his voice was shaking now. "Captain," he said softly, "what do we do?" Ilara did not answer immediately. She reached out and carefully removed one of the drawings from the wall, a picture of a smiling sun with too many rays, drawn in yellow crayon. She folded it gently and placed it inside her uniform jacket, over her heart. Then she turned around. Her face was completely still, not angry, not sad, something else entirely. Something that made Okonkwo, who had served with her for 9 years, take a small step back without meaning to. "Get me Earth Command," she said. Her voice was quiet and steady the way a blade is steady. "Priority Omega." Okonkwo nodded and moved fast. 20 minutes later, a transmission went out across every military frequency in human-controlled space. It was encrypted at the highest level, and it contained only 2 words. Every human officer who received it understood exactly what it meant. Many of them had hoped they would never see those words in their lifetime. The message read, "Threshold broken." Across 1,000 ships and 100 stations, men and women stopped what they were doing. Some of them closed their eyes. Some of them clenched their fists. A few of them cried. And then, quietly and without fanfare, the entire human species began to prepare for something it had not done in over 200 years. Not war. Something worse. The lunar citadel sat buried beneath the surface of Earth's moon, a fortress carved into ancient rock and reinforced with metals that did not exist naturally in this solar system. Most species in the galaxy did not know it existed. Those who did assumed it was a storage facility or a research outpost. It was neither. The citadel was where humanity kept its teeth. Fleet Admiral Konstantin Yuriev walked its corridors with the weight of a man carrying something heavy and invisible. He was 61 years old, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. His hair was white and cut short, and his eyes were the pale gray of winter mornings. He had served in the fleet for 40 years. He had negotiated peace treaties, rescued stranded alien vessels, and once talked a suicidal Thessari commander out of crashing his ship into a populated moon using nothing but patience and a shared bottle of something that burned on the way down. He had never wanted to be in this corridor, walking toward this room for this reason. The War Council chamber was already full when he arrived. 12 senior admirals, the Secretary General of the United Earth Government, the head of naval intelligence, and a woman from a department that officially did not exist. They all stood when Yuriv entered. He waved them down. "Sit," he said. "We do not have time for ceremony." He placed a data chip on the table and activated the holographic display. The room filled with images from the bright horizon. Nobody spoke. One admiral. A woman named Chen Wei, who had commanded a battle cruiser for 20 years, put her hand over her mouth and looked away. "The Draknari did not simply kill these people," Yuriv said, his voice flat and controlled. "The forensic team has confirmed that the attack lasted approximately 9 hours. The colonists were separated into groups. Some were killed quickly. Others were not. The data suggests the Draknari were conducting stress response experiments on living subjects." Silence. "There were 412 children aboard the Bright Horizon," he continued. "None survived." The Secretary General, a thin man named Osai, closed his eyes. "What is the Draknari government's response?" Warlord Kethsaro has released a public statement calling it a border enforcement action. He claims the colony ship refused inspection and resisted boarding. Both claims are lies. We have full sensor recordings from the Perseverance proving that Captain Mensa cooperated completely. And the Galactic Concord. The Concord has issued a formal condemnation and proposed sanctions. Admiral Chen let out a short, bitter sound that might have been a laugh. "Sanctions. Wonderful." Yuriv raised his hand for silence. "The Concord means well. They have always meant well. But every species in this galaxy has watched the Draknari push boundaries for 60 years, and not one of them has done anything meaningful to stop it. They will not start now." He looked around the table, meeting every pair of eyes in the room. "Which is why we will." The woman from the department that did not exist was named Dr. Lena Vasic. She was small, quiet, and had the kind of face that people forgot almost immediately after meeting her. This was useful in her line of work. She stood and walked to the display console. With a few keystrokes, she replaced the images of the bright horizon with something else, a document, old and simple, written in plain language. At the top it read, "Doctrine Prometheus Classification, Absolute." "Most of you have heard of this," Vasic said. "None of you have read it. It was written 180 years ago, after the First Contact Wars, by a committee of military strategists, psychologists, historians, and philosophers. It was designed for a very specific situation, a situation that, until 3 days ago, had never occurred." She paused and looked at the room. "Doctrine Prometheus is not a battle plan. It does not contain fleet formations or target lists. It is a framework, a set of principles for how humanity should respond when a hostile species demonstrates, through its actions, that it will never stop harming human beings voluntarily." Osai leaned forward. "What principles?" Vasic's voice was calm, almost academic. "The doctrine states that in such a scenario, the goal of human military action is not conquest, occupation, or destruction. The goal is to create a memory so clear, so permanent, and so deeply felt that no species in the galaxy will ever consider harming a human again. Not because they fear us, fear fades, but because they understand on a fundamental level that doing so is simply not worth it." The room was very quiet. "The doctrine requires 3 things," Vasic continued. "Overwhelming force, so that the outcome is never in doubt. Absolute precision, so that only those responsible suffer the consequences. And deliberate restraint, so that the galaxy sees not what we are capable of destroying, but what we choose to spare." Admiral Chen spoke slowly. "You are saying we must be terrifying and merciful at the same time." "Yes," Vasic said. "That is exactly what I am saying." Over the next 72 hours, humanity moved with a speed and coordination that stunned the galactic intelligence community. Every shipyard in human space activated emergency production protocols. Reserve fleets were called up from deep storage. Crews were assembled, supplied, and briefed. Military academies graduated their senior classes 6 months early and assigned them to combat vessels. And then there were the ships that nobody knew about. For 2 centuries, humanity had maintained a secret construction program. Not because they planned to conquer anyone, they had no interest in empire, but because they understood something about the universe that most species preferred to ignore. That peace is not the natural state of things. Peace is something you build, maintain, and protect. And sometimes, protecting it requires tools that you hope you never have to use. These ships had been built inside hollowed asteroids, in orbital platforms hidden within the storms of gas giants, in facilities buried so deep inside dead moons that even humanity's closest allies did not know they existed. They were called the Reserve, and they had been sleeping for a very long time. Now they woke up. Captain Alara Voss received her new orders aboard the Perseverance. She was promoted to Battle Group Commander and assigned to the newly commissioned dreadnought UENS Consequence. The Consequence was 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that had never been fired in anger, and carried enough firepower to crack a small moon in half. Its name had been chosen carefully. Everything about this operation had been chosen carefully. Alara transferred her personal belongings to her new quarters. She hung the child's drawing, the smiling sun with too many rays, on the wall above her desk. She looked at it every morning while she planned what was coming. Okonkwo followed her to the Consequence as her executive officer. On their first night aboard, he found her standing on the observation deck, staring out at the fleet assembling around them. Hundreds of ships, then thousands, more arriving every hour. "How are you feeling?" he asked. She did not look at him. "Do you know what bothers me most, Idris? It is not the anger I understand. It is that I know when this is over I will have to go back to being the person I was before, and I do not know if I can." "You will," he said. "That is what makes us different from them." She turned and looked at him. For just a moment, he saw something fragile behind her eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by the same steady calm that had carried her through every crisis of her career. "Yes," she said quietly, "I suppose it is." Across the galaxy, alien intelligence agencies began detecting massive energy readings from the Sol system. Ships were moving, far more ships than anyone believed humanity possessed. Sensor arrays lit up with contacts, and analysts scrambled to update their estimates of human military strength. On a Concord monitoring station, a young Xyrathi intelligence officer stared at her screen and felt her skin go completely white, the color of pure, undiluted terror. She called her supervisor. Her voice was shaking. "They are activating everything," she whispered. "Every ship, every weapon, every asset they have ever built." Her supervisor looked at the data and said nothing for a very long time. Finally, he spoke. "Send a message to the Concord Council. Tell them that whatever they think is about to happen, they are wrong. It is going to be much, much worse." Warlord Kethsaro sat on his command throne aboard the Fang of Drakkar, the largest warship his species had ever built, and felt nothing but contempt. He was enormous, even by Draknari standards, nearly 3 meters of scaled muscle and armored bone. His eyes were the color of molten iron, and his claws left grooves in the metal armrests of his throne every time he tightened his grip. He had ruled the Dominion for 30 years. He had conquered 4 species. He had never lost a battle. And now the humans wanted to play soldier. His intelligence officers had briefed him that morning. The humans were assembling a fleet near the border. 400 ships, they estimated, maybe a few more. Kethsaro had laughed so hard that his officers flinched. 400, he had said, his deep voice rumbling with amusement. "I command 1,200 warships, each one built for combat from the hull inward. The humans build their ships with gardens and libraries inside them. Gardens. They grow flowers in their warships." He had dismissed his officers and opened a galaxy-wide broadcast channel. He wanted everyone to hear what he had to say. "Humans," he announced, his image transmitted to every corner of civilized space. "I know you are angry. I know you think you are strong. So let me make this simple. Send your diplomats. I will return them to you in pieces just like the rest. Or send your little fleet and I will add your ships to my collection. The choice is yours." He cut the channel and settled back in his throne, satisfied. He had no idea what was coming. Alara Voss stood on the bridge of the UENS Consequence and watched the final fleet elements arrive at the staging point, a region of empty space 3 light towers from the Draknari border. The staging point had been chosen for a reason. It was close enough to strike quickly, but far enough that the Draknari could not claim they had been attacked without provocation. Every detail mattered. Every choice was deliberate. The fleet had assembled over 11 days, ships arriving in waves from every corner of human space. Battle cruisers from the Mars shipyards, carriers from the orbital platforms above Titan, fast destroyers from the Centauri colonies, support vessels, electronic warfare platforms, marine transports, medical frigates, and the ships from the reserve, dark, angular vessels with no markings and no names, just hull numbers and silence. When the final count was confirmed, Okonkwo read it to Alara from his console. His voice was very steady, which meant he was working hard to keep it that way. 1,914 combat vessels, Commander. Full crew complements. All weapons armed and operational. Alara nodded. The number was not an accident. It was 400 more than the Draknari total fleet strength. Doctrine Prometheus required that the enemy understand, from the very first moment, that the outcome was not in question. "Open a channel," she said. "All frequencies, all languages, galaxy-wide broadcast." The communications officer looked at her. "Galaxy-wide, Commander. Everyone needs to hear this." The channel opened. A small light on her console turned green, and Alara knew that every ship, station, and communications relay in the galaxy was now listening. She did not give a speech. She did not make threats. She did not explain herself. Instead, she began to read names. Adiz Mensa, age 47, captain of the colony ship Bright Horizon, mother of 2. A pause. David Mensa, age 19, engineering student, her son. Another pause. Yuki Tanaka, age 31, botanist. She was going to the new colony to study soil adaptation. Name after name, age after age, a short description of who each person had been, what they had loved, what they had hoped to do with their lives. She read them all, every single one of the 2,000 people who had died aboard the Bright Horizon. She spoke each name clearly, with the same calm and careful attention, as if she were introducing them at a gathering and wanted to make sure nobody was forgotten. It took 4 hours and 23 minutes. The galaxy listened. On trading stations and colony worlds, on warships and passenger liners, beings of every species stopped what they were doing and listened. Some did not understand why. Some understood perfectly. On the Fang of Drakkar, Kethsaro listened too, at first with irritation, then with impatience. Then, as the hours passed and the names kept coming, with something he had never felt before, a cold, creeping sensation at the base of his skull that his species had no word for, because they had never needed one. It was the feeling of realizing that you have badly misunderstood something important. When the last name had been spoken, Alara sat in silence for 10 seconds. The galaxy held its breath. Then she spoke again. "Warlord Kethsaro, you are listening. I know you are because every being in this galaxy is listening right now." Her voice was calm, not angry, not cold, almost gentle, the way a doctor sounds when delivering news that cannot be taken back. "You have 12 standard hours to surrender every individual involved in the attack on the Bright Horizon, every officer who gave orders, every soldier who carried them out, every commander who knew and did nothing. You will deliver them to the border for trial by an independent galactic tribunal." She paused. "If you do this, we will withdraw. We will pursue justice through law, and when it is finished, we will offer your people the same friendship and partnership we offer everyone. This is not a trick. We do not lie. Ask anyone." Another pause, longer this time. "If you do not do this, then in 12 hours we will come. And I need you to understand something very clearly, Warlord. We will not negotiate after that. We will not make demands. We will not conquer your worlds or take your resources. We have no interest in those things." Her voice dropped slightly, just enough that every listener in the galaxy leaned closer to hear. "We will simply teach the galaxy a lesson, and you will be the lesson." The channel closed. On the Fang of Drakkar, Kethsaro stood from his throne and roared with fury. He smashed his console with one clawed fist, shattering the screen. His officers scrambled back in terror. 1,200 ships, he bellowed. "We outnumber, we." His intelligence chief stepped forward, trembling. "Warlord, we have updated our sensor data. The human fleet is not 400 ships." "What?" "It is 1,900. We do not know where they came from. We did not know they existed." Kethsaro stared at him. For one brief moment, something flickered behind his iron eyes, doubt, perhaps, or the beginning of fear. Then it was gone, buried under decades of pride and the absolute certainty that strength was all that mattered. "It changes nothing," he growled. "We are Draknari. We were born for war. These soft creatures grow flowers on their ships. They read names and think it is a weapon. Let them come." He ordered every fleet to defensive positions. He reinforced the border. He armed every station. And he waited. 12 hours passed. On the bridge of the Consequence, a countdown timer reached 0. Ilara watched it tick down in silence, standing at the center of her bridge with her hands clasped behind her back. Around her, the bridge crew worked at their stations. Nobody spoke. The timer hit 0. Ilara closed her eyes. She took one breath. In that breath was everything: the drawings on the wall of the children's play area, the names she had read aloud, the weight of what she was about to do, and the knowledge that it could never be undone. She opened her eyes. "All ships," she said, "commence." 1,914 human warships jumped to faster-than-light speed in perfect unison. The flash of their departure lit up the empty staging area like a second sun, and then they were gone. The galaxy watched, and on a conquered observation platform, Renak, younger then, just a junior analyst, turned to his colleague and said something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. "May the stars have mercy on the Draknari, because the humans will not." The first thing the Draknari lost was their voice. 90 seconds after the human fleet arrived, every communication relay, satellite, and signal array in all 12 Draknari star systems went dark. Not destroyed, disabled. Human electronic warfare ships had deployed technology that most galactic analysts did not even know was possible. Targeted pulse bursts that burned out transmitter circuits without damaging anything else. Precision so fine that a communication tower on a Draknari colony world stopped working, while the streetlights beside it stayed on. In 90 seconds, the Draknari Dominion went from a connected empire to 12 isolated worlds that could not speak to each other. Kethsaro stood on the bridge of the Fang of Drakkar and screamed orders that nobody beyond his own ship could hear. His fleet captains, spread across 12 systems, suddenly found themselves alone. No orders coming in, no intelligence updates, no coordination. They did not even know the full scope of what was happening. The humans called it synchronized denial. Every military target in the Dominion had been mapped months in advance, some suspected years in advance, by intelligence assets that the Draknari had never detected. Shipyards, fuel depots, weapons factories, orbital defense platforms, ammunition stores, fleet staging areas. Every single one. At the same moment the communications went down, the human fleet split into precisely coordinated strike groups and hit every target simultaneously. Not cities, not civilian infrastructure, not homes or hospitals or schools, just the machines of war. Shipyards that had taken decades to build were disabled in minutes. Fuel reserves that were meant to power the Dominion's fleets for years were vented safely into space. Weapons factories were shut down by Marine teams that breached the facilities, evacuated the workers, and then dismantled the production lines with cutting tools and careful hands. The Draknari soldiers defending these installations fought hard. They were warriors, born and trained for combat, and they did not surrender easily. But the human Marines were something most of them had never encountered before. The galaxy knew humans as diplomats, traders, and explorers. What the galaxy had forgotten, or perhaps never understood, was what lay beneath that friendly surface. Humans were predators, not the largest or the strongest or the fastest predators their home world had ever produced, but the most successful by a margin so wide it was almost absurd. They had not reached the top of their food chain through size or speed. They had done it through endurance, cooperation, and an unsettling ability to remain calm while doing terrible things. The Draknari fought with fury and instinct. The humans fought with patience and geometry. Every room was cleared methodically. Every corridor was taken step by step. They moved in teams that communicated through hand signals and seemed to know what each other was thinking without speaking. When a Draknari soldier charged, roaring, claws extended, the humans did not panic. They stepped aside, worked together, and brought the fight to an end with the minimum force necessary. They did not enjoy it. That was the part that unsettled the Draknari prisoners most when they talked about it later. The humans did not celebrate. They did not taunt. They did what needed to be done, and when it was over, they checked their wounded enemies for injuries and offered them water. Commander Idris Okonkwo led the assault on the Fang of Drakar personally. The boarding action lasted 6 hours. The Draknari flagship was enormous, and its crew of 8,000 fought for every corridor, every bulkhead, every room. Okonkwo lost 47 Marines in the fighting, and he felt each loss like a knife in his chest. He would remember their names for the rest of his life, just as Alara had read the names of the colonists. But they kept moving forward. Kethsaro had retreated to the inner command sanctum of his ship, surrounded by his personal guard, 50 of the largest, most heavily armored Draknari warriors in the Dominion. The sanctum doors were reinforced with triple-layered alloy designed to withstand orbital bombardment. The human Marines breached them in 11 minutes. When Okonkwo entered the sanctum, Kethsaro was standing in the center of the room, alone. His guards lay around him, unconscious or restrained. The warlord had sent them to fight, and now they were gone, and he was the last one standing. He was bleeding from several wounds, but still upright. 3 meters of scaled fury, claws extended, eyes burning with rage and something that looked almost like respect. So Kethsaro rumbled, "You are the ones they sent." Okonkwo kept his weapon raised. His Marines fanned out around him, covering every angle. Nobody moved. "You are soft creatures," the warlord continued, his voice a low growl. "You grow plants in your warships. You read names aloud and call it war. You do not have the stomach to finish what you started." Okonkwo looked at him for a long moment. Then he reached up with one hand and removed his helmet. The face beneath was tired, streaked with sweat and grime and marked by a long cut across one cheek that was still bleeding. But his eyes were steady, not angry, not triumphant, just clear and certain, like someone who had thought very carefully about what he was doing and why. "We are not finishing anything," Okonkwo said. "We are making a memory." Kethsaro stared at him, then he lunged. It took 4 Marines to bring him down, and even then he nearly killed 2 of them. But the warlord fell, and when he did, the last organized resistance in the Draknari Dominion fell with him. The entire operation lasted 11 days. When it was over, every military installation in the Dominion had been neutralized. Every warship had been disabled and left drifting with its crew alive and unharmed inside. Every warlord and military commander had been captured and prepared for transfer to a galactic tribunal. The Draknari civilian population had not been touched. Their cities were intact. Their power grids were running. Their food supplies were untouched. Their hospitals were still operating, and in several cases, human medical teams had arrived to help treat civilian injuries caused by the chaos of the military collapse. Humanity had taken apart an empire's ability to wage war with the precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. They cut out exactly what needed to be removed and left everything else alive and whole. And then they left. They did not claim territory. They did not install a puppet government. They did not demand reparations or resources or tribute. They simply packed up their fleets, collected their dead, and went home. But before they left, they did one more thing. On every Draknari world, in every capital city and major settlement, human engineering teams erected a single structure. It was simple, a column of black stone, polished smooth, roughly 4 meters tall. On each column were carved 2,000 names and a single sentence at the bottom. The sentence read, "They were here, they mattered." Nothing else. No threats. No warnings. No declarations of victory. Just names and the quiet assertion that the people those names belonged to had been real, had been alive, and had deserved better than what they received. Ilara Voss was the last human to leave Draknari space. She stood on the observation deck of the Consequence and watched the Dominion's home world shrink to a point of light behind her. A conquered diplomat had come aboard before departure, a Thessari ambassador named Palak who had known Ilara for years. He found her alone, staring at the stars, and he asked her the question that the entire galaxy wanted answered. "Commander Voss, was this mercy or punishment?" Ilara considered the question for a long time. She thought about the drawings on the wall. She thought about the 412 children. She thought about the 11 days of precise, controlled, devastating action that she had directed, and about the 47 Marines who had died under her command, and about the Draknari civilians who were alive tonight because she had ordered her forces to protect them even while dismantling their government's ability to harm anyone ever again. She looked at Palak. "Yes," she said. Then she walked away and returned to her quarters, where a child's drawing of a smiling sun hung on the wall. She sat in front of it for a long time, alone in the silence of her ship, and allowed herself to feel everything she had held back for 11 days. Nobody saw her cry, but Okonkwo, passing her door an hour later, heard the sound of someone grieving. He stood outside for a moment, placed one hand flat against the door, and then walked away. Some things did not need words. Reneg stopped talking. The trading hall on Station Orus 7 was quiet. Through the viewing window, ships continued to drift past like silver fish, and the artificial rain still smelled wrong, but Ambassador Tolik of the Kalmari did not notice any of it. He was sitting very still, his 4 hands folded in his lap, staring at the Zyrathi diplomat with wide, unblinking eyes. "That was 300 years ago," Tolik said finally. "Yes. What happened to the Draknari after?" Renak walked back to his chair and sat down slowly, as if the telling had drained something out of him. His bioluminescent skin had returned to a calm blue, but it was a tired blue, dim and muted, like a light that had been on too long. "The Dominion collapsed," he said, "not because the humans destroyed it. The humans were very careful not to destroy it. The Dominion collapsed because its own people saw, for the first time, what their leaders had brought upon them. The warlords had told them they were the strongest species in the galaxy. They had told them that power was everything. And then the humans came and took apart their entire military machine in 11 days without harming a single civilian. And suddenly, the Draknari people understood that their leaders had been lying to them. He paused. There were protests, then reforms, then elections, something the Draknari had never had before. Within 20 years, the Dominion had dissolved itself and reformed as the Draknari Republic. They joined the Galactic Concord 30 years after that. And the humans accepted them. The humans welcomed them. They sent teachers and doctors and engineers just as they did for everyone. They helped rebuild what the Draknari wanted to rebuild. They asked for nothing in return except friendship. And here is the part that most species find difficult to believe: they meant it. There was no hidden agenda, no long game. The humans simply decided that the Draknari people were not their enemy and never had been. The warlords had been the enemy, and the warlords were in prison. Tolek shook his head slowly. That does not sound like the behavior of a species that just defeated a military empire. No, Renek agreed. It does not, and that is precisely why every species in this galaxy follows the rule. What rule? Renek looked at him as if the answer should have been obvious by now. We never harm humans. Tolek sat with this for a while. His species was new to the galactic community, and he was still learning to read the currents beneath the surface of interstellar politics. But even he could sense the shape of what Renek was telling him. You are afraid of them, he said. Renek tilted his head. No, I am not afraid of the humans. I have human friends. I have shared meals with them, celebrated their holidays, mourned their dead. I have watched human doctors work for 30 hours straight to save a Zyrathi child they had never met, simply because the child was sick and they knew how to help. His skin flickered. A pulse of warm gold that Tolek had learned meant deep affection. I love the humans, Renek said simply. Most species do once they get to know them. They are funny and strange and impossibly generous. They form bonds with everything. I once watched a human engineer cry because she had to decommission an old maintenance robot. She said it had been a good worker and deserved a proper goodbye. She was completely serious. Tolek almost smiled at that. Then what are you saying? Renek's gold faded. The gray-violet color returned, the one that looked like fear. I am saying that the humans are the kindest species I have ever known, and I am saying that their kindness is a choice. They choose it every single day, with full awareness of what they are capable of when they stop choosing it. He leaned forward. The galaxy is full of dangerous things, Ambassador. We have predator species that hunt for pleasure. We have hive minds that consume worlds. There are beings made of living plasma that drift between stars and think thoughts we cannot begin to understand. I have seen all of them, and none of them frighten me the way the humans do. Why? Because all of those species are dangerous by nature. They cannot help what they are. But the humans are dangerous by choice. They built themselves into the friendliest, most open, most welcoming civilization in the galaxy, and they did it while sitting on top of an instinct for violence that runs so deep it is written into their bones. Every smile is a decision. Every act of kindness is a victory over something inside them that remembers what it was like to be a predator on a brutal world. He met Tolek's eyes. They are the only species in this galaxy that will love you with everything they have. They will heal your sick, teach your children, share their music, and defend you against anyone who threatens you. And if you force them, if you truly, deliberately harm them in a way that cannot be forgiven, they will break you so completely that your grandchildren will flinch at the memory. And then, when it is over, they will offer to help you rebuild. The trading hall was silent, except for the soft patter of artificial rain. That, Renek said quietly, is why we never harm humans. Ambassador Tolek returned to his ship that evening. He sat in his private quarters for a long time, staring at the wall, thinking about everything Renek had told him. Then he opened his diplomatic console and began drafting his report to the Kalmari government. He wrote for several hours, detailing everything he had learned about galactic politics, trade routes, alliance structures, and the complex web of relationships between species. But when he reached the section on humanity, he stopped. He deleted the 3 paragraphs he had written and replaced them with a single line. It read, "Under no circumstances are we to harm the humans. This is not a suggestion. It is the most important thing I have ever written." He sent the report and went asleep. 3 weeks later, a human trade envoy arrived at the Calmery homeworld. Her name was Suki Okonkwo. She was 34 years old, bright-eyed and energetic, with dark skin, a quick laugh, and her grandfather's kind eyes. She carried crates of cultural exchange materials, books, music, seeds from Earth's gardens, and a collection of children's drawings that human students had made as gifts for the Calmery children. The drawings were bright and messy, full of stars and planets and smiling figures with too many arms, because the children had been told that Calmery had 4 hands and thought that was wonderful. She had no idea that her grandfather had once stood on the bridge of an alien flagship with blood on his face and spoken the words that an entire galaxy still remembered. She had no idea that the Calmery government had been debating her arrival for weeks, or that Ambassador Tolik had personally insisted that she be welcomed with the highest honors their culture could offer. All she knew was that the Calmery were a newly contacted species, and that they seemed remarkably eager to be friends with humanity. They had rolled out something that appeared to be a red carpet, though it was orange, because that was the closest color they had, and their welcoming committee was so large it spilled out of the landing area and into the streets of their capital city. Suki stepped off her shuttle, looked at the crowd, and grinned. "Hello," she said in carefully practiced Calmery. "I brought presents." The crowd erupted with joy. Children rushed forward. Diplomats beamed. Ambassador Tolik watched from the back of the gathering, and when Suki knelt down to hand a Calmery child a drawing of a smiling sun with too many rays, a copy of a picture that had hung on a wall 300 years ago and 1,000,000 light years away, he felt something catch in his chest. She was so warm, so open, so completely, radiantly human. And behind her smile, behind her laughter and her bright eyes, there was something ancient and patient and vast, something that had learned long ago that the best way to protect the ones you love is to be so good and so kind that the universe itself thinks twice before giving you a reason to stop. Tolik watched the human woman play with the children, and he understood, finally, what Renak had been trying to tell him. The humans were not dangerous because of what they could do. They were dangerous because of how hard they tried not to do it. And as long as the galaxy remembered that, as long as every species looked at the black stone columns on a dozen Draknari worlds and read the names carved into them and understood what those names represented, then the rule would hold. Nobody would harm the humans, and the humans would keep choosing to be kind. And the galaxy would be better for it.